as an opportunity to reflect, analyze, and present new ideas to renew and unite the ANC. As you know, we also will have to review policies, the efficacy of our policies at this NGC. Comrades, it also gives us an opportunity to get into the psyche of the organization and to introspect our commitment to renewal of this 109-year-old organization. I'm sure that many of you have a list of issues that you believe we need to correct, and we hope that you will not fear making those available to us in the discussion. The focus of the roundtable today is on two discussion papers. The first one is Organizational Renewal, and also the review of the Eye of the Needle. And this is the first of the Umrabulo roundtables, and it will be held until the end of April. So we will be holding these roundtables where there will be a maximum of 200 participants, and the sessions will all be live streamed on Facebook, so you are live already at the moment. The first, I'm just looking for the program, which was sent to me on my phone. Maybe Comrade Rahmat, if you could put the program back on the screen, if that's okay. Rahmat? Comrade Rahmat? Okay, may I please ask the first of our panels is Comrade Phoebe Potgieter and Comrade Nathi Mtetwa to present to us on Through the Eye of the Needle. They will be followed by Comrade Mdu and Comrade Nomvula presenting on Organizational Renewal. So I'd like to invite Comrade Phoebe and Comrade Nathi to please proceed.
Thank you very much, Comrade TSG. Thanks to comrades who have attended our meeting today. I would ask for your indulgence. My network here is not very, in fact, the network signal is poor where I am. So we will have to shut down the camera at some point. Comrade DSG and comrades, well, this document, Through the Eye of a Needle, is going to be fitting very well with the organizational renewal, because the document itself is a signature political perspective of the ANC for the best cadres to lead our movement and society at large. In other words, it has been from time to time referred to as the nomenclature of the ANC on leadership questions. So its origins, comrade, and indeed its objective, even currently, came as a result of our movement's determination to stem the tide of alien cultures in the movement, including, but not limited to, the use of money in the internal election processes of the ANC and its general use to determine the fortunes of the ANC, this very glorious movement, which is the heritage of our people. Now, to this extent, Chair, the issue here is that we are in this process of the review of the document and faced with both objective and subjective factors which the movement have to deal with in order to be able to move forward and live according to the values, the principles of the movement, which ask for upright individuals in the movement. So just an overview on objective factors. Those are the factors which are external of the ANC, which the ANC has no control over. Firstly, at the broader societal level, the exploitative system of capitalism dominates almost the whole world, promotes individual profit and success rather than inclusive economic, social development, and environmental protection. Greed, crass materialism, and conspicuous consumption has been on the rise since the end of the 20th century. But the ANC and ANC cadres are expected to promote the values of human solidarity against all odds, against this very macro system of capitalist mode of production with exploited and oppressed people, social justice, revolutionary morality, good ethics, and humility within the system that is exploitative and corrupt inherently. So you can see, Chair, that what we expect and what is expected of the cadres of the movement is to be able to rise above the confines of the system which humanity globally find itself dominated by. On the subjective factors, for instance, issues of political opportunist or political opportunism, which has infiltrated the movement since, you know, in the early 90s. By the time we went to the National Conference in 1997, already some of these things were raised within the movement. And they are driven by access to careers and power rather than the needs of the people. Many act against our core values and the issue of the erosion of political consciousness, amongst others, matters related to factionalism and people's failure to grasp the fact that there is nothing wrong when people have different choices and preferences of leadership when you go to conference. But beyond that, whoever emerges from the conference of the ANC becomes the leader of everybody else. A specific matter of the role of money in the internal elections or election processes of the ANC. So much has been said, and as we say that the diagnostic report of the ANC has alluded to these points recently, but over a period of time, these matters have been raised in the movement. That money has become a big determinant on who becomes the leaders of the ANC at all levels, selling and buying votes for leadership. All these things which we talk about all the time are matters which make the ANC to veer off its critical and strategic objective of creating a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. So it is a reality, comrades, that money plays a role, and that campaigning for leadership these days need resources which are being used. Now, in looking at this question, comrade, and trying to get the movement think through these processes, we painting two scenarios here. The first one is that the money in the ANC should be prohibited. There's both the downside and the advantage on that, or advantages on that. That when we prohibit money or the use of money in determining the processes of the ANC, we are asserting ourselves as a revolutionary movement, a force of the left biased to the working class and the poor, were opening a space for the poor and the working class to have a stake in the leadership of the ANC. We shun those who would want to see the ANC for sale to the highest bidder. The downside to the prohibition of the usage of money is that creative means and ways are going to be developed where people would work underground to continue with this negative tendency. The second scenario, because as I said, we thought not to be prescriptive, but to put to the cadres of the movement to think through these matters, that the second scenario in this instance is that you restrict the use of money or regulate it as a principle. Then you'll see then how you go about doing that and regulating that. The assertion there is that if you say no to that, the proverbial horse has bolted already, because somebody does have money and that somebody would be using money to buy people in the ANC. So the area which becomes an issue is that only those who have money are going to be able to access leadership to the ANC. And as we look at reviewing this document, comrades, we continued to do what we believe in as a revolutionary movement, to learn and get lessons from other experiences. Here in the instance of China, one of the things which China and Cuba, for instance, one of the issues which makes the Communist Party of China to be much stronger politically and ideologically is that first and foremost, the emphasis on training cadres politically, on political education, the whole of the party, and ensuring quality cadres, the development of all-round competence and practical skills and experience, so that even when you talk of deployment, all of that is taken on board. The keeping up of the times and continually reforming, modernizing and innovating is one of the lessons out of the Communist Party of China. We still are looking at what is it that the Communist Party of Cuba has been able to do and succeed as they are in Cuba against economic blockade by the US, against all counter-revolutionary forces, but continue to be steadfast as it is. So these are some of the things, comrades, which we factor in when we look at reviewing this document. But as we move forward, as our strategy and tactics in 2017 identified key areas of strategic interventions in order to raise the overall quality of values and implementation of the movement's plans. One, the revitalizing and strengthening of our vision, values and principles and policies. In these, comrades, reasserting it. It doesn't matter that some people decide not to be true to the values of the ANC, but the movement has an obligation to the current generation of leaders and those who come after us to be true to our policies and values, to restore the integrity of systems and managing membership and leadership, dealing with conduct, ill discipline, and corruption. So these things, comrades, are the challenges of the day, which we say if we are to build a strong movement, if we are to take the movement to higher planes, or rather take it back to its glory, we definitely have to do these things. And the building of leadership integrity. And this refers to, again, revisiting the criteria to qualify as well as processes of selecting leaders in the movement. The strengthening of the integrity of technical systems, including modernization of the membership, which since the last conference is what the movement is dealing with. So in essence, comrades, what we are saying is that as a metaphor, our document through the eye of a needle need to take into cognizance that the needle itself has to be a small needle, because you can talk of a needle when in fact you are talking of a big hole where everybody is just moving into that eye without being scrutinized, without the focus which is needed to produce the best cadres amongst us to lead our movement and to lead society as a whole. I will end there, Comrade Chair, on the introduction, and perhaps give it to Comrade Phoebe as part of the opening on this issue of through the eye of a needle. Thank you very much, Comrade DSG.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Comrade DSG and Comrade Nati, and good afternoon, comrades. What I will do is basically to focus on matters of emphasis, because Comrade Nati has given quite a good overview of what the document consists of. But just to repeat the point that the National General Council is a midterm review, and I will therefore focus on some of the areas in terms of those strategic areas of implementation, which paragraph 80 refer to what has been done, how far are we with, what are the areas that we haven't implemented, and then to look at the broad issue of the principles of ANC's membership selection, leader selection, and what are some of the key issues that I want to emphasize, which has been raised by Comrade Nati. But in paragraph 9 of the discussion document on Through the Eye of the Needle, there are 3 issues that's been raised on how we should deal with this question about making sure that we select the best leadership, and that we select leadership with the capabilities, the capacities, the ethics, the commitment to be able to fulfill the duties that they're expected to fulfill. The first one is that we need to strengthen our electoral processes, and this process has evolved. For example, if one look at the draft guidelines that's been put forward for the selection of local councillors, it has been significantly strengthened from what we had for the 2016 elections in terms of the criteria that's been set, both in terms of what we expect from councillors, the basic requirements, but also experience, capabilities, etc., but also in terms of ethical requirements from councillors. So I think that we are, it may look at as small steps, but I think that we are making progress in terms of strengthening our requirements for the selection processes. The other point that's also in terms of that first one about strengthening our electoral processes, 54th National Conference called, the resolution called for the appointment of an electoral commission. The last NEC that we just came from has appointed, in fact, the electoral commission with terms of reference that it must oversee the election both of elected leadership, so our NEC, PECs and RECs, but it also needs to oversee the process of the selection of public representatives. So in a sense, we are looking at how do we implement the resolutions to give effect to this first strategic task. I mean, of course, what do they say? The pudding is in the eating, and we need to look at what the outcomes of those processes will be. But as I say, we have begun to implement that. The second one is the implementing an intensive program to restore the integrity of systems of managing membership and leadership. And I think that that relates to the first one. We have, the ANC has over the last 2 years since National Conference, implemented a new online membership system. And the conference resolution is very specific. It says we must implement a membership system that will prevent gatekeeping, and secondly, that will ensure the integrity and that you don't have the kind of practices that we see in conferences, that it should prevent that kind of situation. And I think that with the phase one of the membership system, where members are now responsible for managing their membership, there is a ban on bulk buying of membership, and all of those measures and systems that's been building is part of building a membership system, as conference instructed us, that has integrity, so that you don't just simply have people that are not members of the ANC or activists, or who don't even know that they're members, then contributing towards a delegate towards conference, and then the subversion of organizational processes. But of course, the broader question about whether through the eye of the needle is to look at the question about the principles of the basis on which we elect leadership. The question about it needs to be representative of the motive forces in the composition of the ANC's RECs, PECs, NECs, our public representatives. Do we see representation from all of the motive forces? The question about the different strands of the ANC, and 20 years ago, when Eye of the Needle was developed, when we talked about strands, we talked about prison, and we talked about the mass democratic movement and the underground. But the reality is that 30 years after the unbanning of the ANC, what are those different strands of the movement that we need to see represented in our public representatives as well as our leadership collective? And then, of course, the non-racial character of the ANC needs to be reflective in the leadership, as well as the question about gender equity, which is one of our fundamental principles. And those principles need to be looked at every single point in time, and then to be able to ask the questions: do our leadership reflect this? And indeed, do we in terms of leadership, our processes of leadership election, whether indeed we remain true to these principles? The final issue is which the document raised, is this question about the balance between sanctions and organizational culture. Because on the one hand, we have guidelines, and we have a constitution that provide the broad framework, and it says that you should do the following, or you may do the following, or you will do the following, and if you don't, there will be certain sanctions. And of course, as the document also say, that there's no point in having guidelines if people transgress those guidelines, there's not consequence. So the question about consequence management is important. But I would argue that, and the document also made the point that more importantly, it is organizational culture, that renewal and restoring the integrity and ethics of the movement is about building an organizational culture where there's consequence management, but also that encourage through example, through raising of political consciousness, encourage a new way of doing things. And those things need to go together, that you don't change an organization only by focusing on the one. It needs to be the combination of the two, because ill discipline and lack of ethics function in a situation where you don't have a broad spread consciousness and an organization that frowns on it, not just through punishment, but in general through peer pressure, through engagement, etc., on those kind of behaviors. So you need a combination of the two. Going through some of the resolutions, there was an interesting decision, Comrade DSG, that was taken at the NEC Lekgotla in 2010, January Lekgotla, and it is in the NEC Bulletin, where the NEC said that one of the things that we need is an ABC of leadership. And ABC booklet of ANC leadership, to be able to say that this is the issues that's expected of leadership, and this is what's not expected of leadership once occupying certain position. Because getting elected, and this is what Eye of the Needle is about, making sure that we elect the best cadres for the task ahead. But it's also about what leadership then do once they elected into a position or given a certain responsibility. And I think that this idea of an ABC of leadership is something that we need to look at as we look at the review of Through the Eye of the Needle. Just to conclude by saying that I think that as we've seen in countless national general councils since 2000 in Port Elizabeth, and all subsequent conferences and national general councils, we have raised these issues and said that we need to look at how do we make progress on these issues. And often it looks like we're making 2 steps forward and about 3 steps back, but we need to make sure that we are resolute about these issues and that we do implement the decisions that we take, both in terms of systems, but also changing organizational culture and ensuring that we have consequence management. Thank you very much, Comrade DSG.
Thank you very much, Comrade Phoebe. Comrades, I'm just reminding the next 2 speakers that you have between 10 and 15 minutes, and then we'll be followed by both our respondents, and thereafter we'll open a few hands for questions and discussion. So I'd like to invite now Comrade Mdu Ntuli to make his input, and followed by Comrade Nomvula Mokonyane. Comrade Mdu is Provincial Secretary of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Please go ahead, Comrade Mdu.
Thanks, Comrade DSG, and good afternoon to the leadership of the ANC and all comrades who are part of this dialogue. I think the first point that I would like to make, Comrade DSG, is that I think it was most appropriate that the discussion on the renewal and the Eye of the Needle happened simultaneously, because the two are dialectically linked. The quality of the organization and the outcome in terms of its leadership elected in conference talk to each other in a very dynamic way. The 54th National Conference, comrades, made probably what is regarded as profound resolutions in terms of our effort to consolidate the organization, to address organizational decay, but also to reposition the movement as an agent of change. Because that resolution emanates from a clear understanding that the ANC does not exist for its own sake. It has a responsibility to our nation, and therefore it will not be able to discharge that responsibility unless it is of certain caliber and of certain quality. The renewal itself in the ANC is not necessarily something that is new. It has occurred in many instances, and probably even without getting to much details. Comrades will remember that in the early 40s, with the formation of the ANC Youth League, the leagues, the Women's League after that, and the repositioning of the ANC, which was led under the leadership of President Uma and the Secretary General Kalata, was in itself a certain kind of renewal and a repositioning of the movement in order to respond effectively to the challenges of that moment. We can also include that what happened in the Morogoro conference was in the same context of an organization that is asking itself difficult questions about how to adapt and remain relevant and resilient in the context of addressing challenges all the time. So the renewal, as I said earlier on, the ANC is not necessarily an amateur in this cause or in the subject of organizational renewal. It's a task that has centrally occupied the movement throughout its existence. And that's part of the reasons why the ANC is one of the few institutions that have existed for more than 100 years. It has not been an automatic exercise. It has been a function of the experience, the work, the quality of leadership, the caliber of membership, and the commitment to ensure that the movement stays true to its own values and and fight anything that contradicts this mission. Now, the discussion document on the organizational renewal has made a few observations, which I think are important and they are quite correct in terms of our own situation. There is an aspect that talks about the nature of the challenge that faces the ANC, what is called in the document problem statement number 1. There are 3, if not 4, key issues that are raised there. The first one is that we must find a way in which we can overcome the weakness of being an inward-looking organization. An organization that only concerned about itself, but significantly lack the capacity and the capability to mobilize and lead the motive forces of the National Democratic Revolution. The second point is that leaders and members of our movement, we are also having a difficulty in terms of attracting sufficiently properly schooled activists and leaders of our movement who are loyal to the ethics and the values of the organization. And this is the second challenge that that the problem statement in the document has highlighted as a major challenge that requires attention. For instance, these are issues about how do we avoid a situation where either members or elected leaders happen to speak against collectively adopted positions. And how do we fight and defeat populism within our ranks? But how do we also address a phenomenon that is quite disturbing in the ANC, which one can characterize as a phenomenon of relevance and survival, where we do things not because they are in line with the mission of the movement and they represent our value system, but we do them in order to survive and in order to remain relevant within a particular cohort of leaders or members of it. I think that's one of the fundamental challenges that in many instances is actually reflecting on the quality and the caliber of the African National Congress. Of course, the other point is a lack of what we may call basic leadership skills, as the document points out. Ability to communicate clear, unambiguous, and convincing messages, which do not only inspire the rank and files within the ANC, but equally serves to agitate and mobilize society and the motive forces of the revolution into a common program in a manner that defines clearly what is our common purpose, what we intend to achieve, and what are the means at our disposal through which we are intending to achieve our objective. The document also makes observation that because of all of those weaknesses, we saw in the recent elections, 2016 and even before that, a declining support of the African National Congress, which was a reflection that society is beginning to be impatient, justifiably so, because the organization was not demonstrating effectively the kind and the type of leadership that inspires confidence. The second part of the document, which talks about the problem statement, number 2, is that the ANC is constantly losing credibility and trust because of our performance in the elections and because of our inability to realize the commitment that we've made to our people that we are the ones who are going to lead them towards the creation of a better life, and that better life has to be a better life for all. The second question that relates to the credibility and the trust, fundamental, is also because when people do no longer have, when the organization loses credibility and people tend not to trust it, it then undermines 2 fundamental things that drive society towards attaining a particular goal. The first one is the hope, and the second one is the belief. So part of the reasons why people will go to church every Saturday or every Sunday, or whatever the period that they decide to go to church, or even they pray, those who pray without going to church, is because in the main they are driven by 2 important fundamental expectations. The first one is they are driven by the understanding that their prayers, they are hopeful that their prayers will deliver the aspirations that they are praying for. And they also are driven by the belief that that which they are doing is going to happen. Now, when you lose the support of our people, you obviously undermine that hope and the belief which is required that has kept the ANC as part of our people for many years. And of course, there are consequences for that. One of the consequences is the severe weaknesses of the National Liberation Movement in its totality, the inability to provide strategic leadership to the state and society in general, but also the weaknesses in terms of the state organs, which tend to reflect the state of affairs within the society where we live. The document also, Comrade GST, highlights some of the positive work that has been done, of course, many of which are still at an infant stage, and many of us would agree that the situation in 2020 has contributed as well to the inability of the organization to realize some of these things. The first one is building capacity through political education. A great deal of work has been done by the Old Tambo School of Leadership, but of course it's not enough. I think close to 100,000 activists have been taken to the school and the courses there. Of course, it's not enough given the size of the ANC membership. The second point was about the focus of the movement, reorientating the ANC from being an inward-looking organization to an organization that is grappling with matters that affect our societal challenges, if I were to put it that way. Work has happened in that aspect, and of course, as I said with the first one, there's also a great deal of work that still needs to be done in order for the ANC to reposition itself into an agent of change. The third aspect is the selection of the best cadres to lead social transformation, which is related to the aspects of what both Comrade Phoebe and Comrade Nati dealt with. In particular, the establishment of the Electoral Committee is part of repositioning the organization in terms of that, the work of that committee to ensure that we live up to what is prescribed in the eye of the needle in terms of how we select our public representatives, as well as those who occupy positions in the leadership. This is going to be a very important intervention if it is rolled out and succeed, because it would address the question of choosing the best cadres who are not just political competent, but also with the technical skill in order to lead social transformation, which is, as we all know, is a very complex undertaking. The fourth area that the organization has done some work is related to planning, monitoring, and accountability. In the beginning of 2020, there was a very clear line elaborated by the National Executive Committee in terms of what structures of the ANC are expected to do at the beginning of the year and how to ensure that the program and the planning that has been agreed upon is constantly being monitored, at least on a quarterly basis. Some of this could not happen, understandably, and where work happened, it was not at the level at which you can be proud of because of the constraint that I think we all know we found ourselves. The last one is the question of decisively dealing with the loss of integrity and discipline. Of course, on this one as well, it's a much more difficult one, but I think the ANC as an organization is beginning to accept the fact that individual members and leaders of the ANC should not come before the ANC. We need the ANC first, and then we need individual members and leaders of the organization. And that is why the National Executive Committee in its last meeting started the process of adopting a framework that must regulate how to deal with challenges relating to comrades who are in difficulty with the law or who are facing serious accusations that have the potential to tarnish the image and the standing of our movement. So I think the work is happening there, it's beginning to happen. Of course, I think with time, I'm quite certain that it will get into a level in which we can be proud of. The last area that I also believe that has contributed in the effort of the renewal of the organization is the establishment of what is called the Dispute Resolution Committee, which is led by the Deputy Secretary General, which is a new entity in the ANC, which is as a result of the 54th National Conference, primarily to ensure that even before members of the ANC can resort to court, there is an internal exhaustive process which begins at a level of the branch and and at the level of the National Executive Committee to deal and address all challenges and disputes and problems that are confronting the organization. Just in closing comment, DSG, I think my own view is that if we were to succeed in the renewal of the ANC, because I think the central question would be, how will we see a renewed ANC? What are its features? What are its elements? How are we going to see it? The first one, in my own view, is that, of course, a renewed ANC would restore the ANC into its historic position in terms of the ANC being seen, accepted, and understood by our people as not just any other political party, but a national liberation movement and the gathering of outstanding talents and skills of our patriots in South Africa. Once the ANC is understood in that fashion, that here is a gathering of outstanding talents and patriots of our country, that is when we would be certain that the ANC is actually in terms of this renewal. A renewed ANC, of course, will have to be different. And because it's going to be different, I hold a very strong view that there are many of our comrades, as Nyambo indicated earlier on, who are in the ANC because the ANC is in the current state of affairs, who would not qualify, who would neither qualify to be members nor to its leader. Once it is renewed, positioned, and able to attract people on the basis of their commitment to the mission and the vision of the African. It will be difficult to retain within its own ranks people that are called staff writers, opportunists, and careerists who are essentially in the ANC, not because they support the policies of the movement and its values, but they are here in order to be able to meet their own immediate needs. So I think the emphasis would be that the discussion document places a very fundamental responsibility at the feet of us who are currently members of the ANC and leaders of the ANC, honestly embarked on an important work of the renewal of our movement. Because I believe that history and circumstances have imposed that duty on us. And if we fail on it, we would have failed not only the ANC, but the National Democratic Revolution. Thanks for coming.
Nomvula, please go ahead. Comrade Nomvula is the head of organizing of the ANC she's a member of the NEC and head of the organizing department.
Thank you very much, Comrade DSG, leaders of the African National Congress, comrades and participants in this session. I think this is quite a very clear demonstration of how the ANC is adapting to the realities of the current pandemic and also renewing itself on how it must be able to navigate through the challenges. These kind of interactions actually bear testimony that we are not just modernizing the African National Congress, but we are also making the ANC much more accessible beyond just gatherings of huge numbers in a stadium, but also through these particular sessions that we as the movement have been involved in since the first lockdown level 5. Just to start by saying, picking up from what Comrade Mdu and the other two comrades have spoken about, renewal is inherent in the founding of the African National Congress, dating as far back as its own origin and in response to the formation of the Union of South Africa, and as well as the 1913 Land Act and many other means that were introduced to perpetuate inequality, racism, patriarchy, discrimination of various communities on the basis of race, color, including on the basis of gender. What is of importance in the preparation documents, the discussion documents that we have in preparation for our NGC, is that the documents, not only the NGC document, but the internal discussions that have happened within the organization going into the NASREC conference, is that the organization has put the issue of renewal as one of the very important means that must help the ANC to grow, not only in numbers, but qualitatively and in a sustained manner. Comrades have spoken about the institutional arrangements that have been put together. Comrades have also spoken about the programs that have been put together. But of importance with the NASREC resolution around organizational renewal, the emphasis has been on the power of a member and the responsibility of an individual member of the ANC. And I must hasten to say, part of what fueled this kind of discussion was our road towards NASREC, which was actually filtered with many challenges and some of the experiences that the movement has never had, such as taking the ANC to court and the courts determining what is a correct decision against the resolutions of the African National Congress, having conferences where there were members of members, and there were branches that were subdivided into 4 branches when one ward is supposed to be a ward. And all those kind of ills necessitated a reflection, starting with the National General Council prior to the NASREC conference, where we had an organizational report, a diagnostic report that the ANC on its own was able to put its own challenges to the public, and asserted that unless otherwise the ANC goes through its own self-correction, it may actually end up being an organization of the past and an organization that is less relevant for the present and for the future. And this NGC that Comrade DSG spoke about, and is also the reason why we have gathered here today on, gives us an opportunity to then assess whether we've been able to honor the resolutions as they were adopted in NASREC, so that then we are able to show the program, a programmatic intervention. And amongst those interventions, it's exactly what comrades have alluded to, the institutional arrangements that have been put together, but of importance also, it is about the ANC on its own beginning to understand who is a member of the African National Congress, using its own membership system, as well as giving the power of the branch back to the branches and not to the leadership, because over time, the ANC post-1994, as Comrade Nati has referred to the 1997 conference, the dominance of those who are in leadership had seriously contributed to some of the challenges that we have, the sins of incumbency, the issues about different expectations for individual members who joined the African National Congress. But in our last National Executive Committees, the Khutla, there were 5 tasks that were then identified as part of the realization of the NASREC 54th conference tasks that were identified. Amongst others is about representing and organizing our communities and the motive forces, as well as ensuring that we transform society through spreading our values, leading with integrity and convincing all the rightness of our goals, and of importance, ensuring that we've got policies and programs that are embraced by everybody in the best interest, not only of the members of the African National Congress, but of society in general. And the other important thing is about the development of cadres in a systematic way. And lastly, making sure that we have the ANC that has its presence across the length and breadth of our country, in the same vein as we have structures and systems of government across the length and breadth of our country. So the power of the branch, the responsibility of the member, and the responsibility of branches to be the ones that must actually bring the ANC closer to the communities where we live. And this also finds expression in the past slogans and in the past the historic document of the African National Congress in terms of ready to govern, that we need to make sure that we've got organs that will make sure that there's direct participation of civil society, as well as people's participation in the processes of governance. So it is those things that we've been able to do, and I can here say we've now been able to have a footprint across the length and breadth of our country with over 4,000 branches and structures of the ANC in the country. It is only the ANC that has got that. The challenge becomes, who are those people who are within those structures? And how do we make sure that they are the capable members who join the ANC to serve the people of South Africa, and not to come in with the assumptions of being the ones who must be first prioritized in the work of the African National Congress. There are two important things also that have to do with the tasks of the organization, particularly internally, as part of organizational renewal, making sure that our branches become the eyes and ears of those that live in their own communities. The ANC has been calling on the formation of the street committees, where we are today in response to the COVID and the gender-based violence and femicide. The ANC is busy rolling out the formation of street committees. Already we have started with the street coordinators who come together and work in the communities where we live as part of the COVID command councils and gender-based violence and femicide response teams. This helps to make the ANC relevant in terms of what it is about, as compared to what the diagnostic report has actually picked up, that we are an organization that is inward-looking and very self-centered. We've also found it quite easy to work together with different sectors, such as the work done by the Young Women's Desk, working together with the ANC Women's League in dealing with awareness programs, empowerment of young women as activists, and the development programs, using different platforms. Like today on a Thursday, they have actually made Umanyano, which is historically known as a Umanyano Mama Bomtandazo. With the advent of the use of technology and the challenges of these two current pandemics, we have been able to make sure that Umanyano also deals with some of the societal challenges and the societal ills. Today, for example, the focus is around the issues of expropriation of land and the role and potential that the work provides for the emancipation of women. So it is those kind of sectoral activities that the ANC, in its quest for renewal and moving away from inward-looking programs and self-centered interests, we are beginning to deal with them. There are various community-based initiatives, such as the Every Friday activities that focus on gender-based violence and femicide. Provinces such as the Eastern Cape that have taken, through the leadership of the ANC in the province, the responsibility of being the face of promoting men as partners against gender-based violence, also responds to what the document is actually saying. As part of the tasks of our branches, the task of a member, and the responsibility of our organization in mobilizing society behind the programs of the African National Congress. Just to cite a few. The next issue that is of importance is to address the ongoing challenges. The three comrades have alluded to those challenges, and amongst the other challenges is the fact that we operate in an environment where foreign tendencies begin to creep into the ANC and are taken as a norm, yet they are things that the African National Congress has to frown upon. Comrade Nati spoke about the use of money, the issues of slate politics, the issues of following personalities as compared to supporting and embracing the program and vision of the African National Congress. It is those things that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, going into this NGC, one of the pertinent questions that we need to put to ourselves, starting with the NEC, is that, has NASREC actually broken the slates? Starting with the collective of the National Executive Committee. Have we demobilized those that rallied behind individuals and personalities? is self-correction, criticism and self-criticism already being realized through the kind of members that we have? And I dare say, Comrade DSG, it's quite difficult to say cadres, because I'm not sure whether there is any barometer to say we are cadres. That is there actually an acceptance of criticism and self-criticism, of adhering to our resolutions in their entirety, and being able to disabuse one from factional politics? My response is that we are far from realizing that. We are in a painstaking kind of a process, but yes, there are many amongst us in the ANC who are quite tired of those factional and backward tendencies that do not help the ANC to earn it being a leader of society. And therefore, we need to look at all those things that make many of our members, ourselves included as leadership, being over-obsessed with belonging to a particular group and a tendency, as compared to us embracing the programs and the mission of the African National Congress. Lastly, Comrade DSG, is that as we look at these issues, we also have to appreciate that the ANC has to either adapt or die. And amongst other things that it has to deal with, it's to deal with the current challenges of the absence of a youth league or a youth formation that is progressive. And notwithstanding that, also the appreciation that we now live in a multi-party kind of a system, which then gives South Africans various options, including independence at the local level. We find ourselves in a situation where the systematic separate development patterns of the past still continue in the manner in which we build sustainable communities, and hence we are not able to integrate societies beyond race, beyond class. And hence some of the issues that are raised even in looking at the elections about constituency-based elections against proportional representation, it is these things that the ANC itself is battling with, so that then it can't be a challenge for the ANC to have a constituency representation against proportional representation. So these are the things that, as part of the renewal, we definitely have to look at. The battle of ideas becomes the last issue that also the discussion document call upon all of us to make sure that we deal with the social media and how it contributes towards disillusionment, fake news, as well as character assassination, and even assuming leadership beyond those that have been democratically elected to lead the country, through them providing alternatives that have not been tested anyway. I would say the ANC has a potential. The work that is being done does indicate that it is possible. What is of importance is the willingness to self-correct and to also appreciate and embrace criticism that seeks to contribute towards the renewal, not only of the African National Congress, but of society at large, because renewal is what is the primary goal of the ANC's mission of building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous united South Africa. Thank you very much, Comrade DSG.
Comrade Nomvula, thank you very much. I think that we've received 4 inputs, which have been very rich, providing a wealth of information about what's contained in the 4 papers. I'm now going to invite 2 very distinguished academics to be our respondents. The first would be Professor Mcebisi Ndechana, is the head of the Political Economy faculty at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, MISTRA. Professor Ndechana has an extremely rich career as an academic, as a researcher, as somebody who has studied African politics, as well as politics of nationalism, and also electoral politics. He writes regularly for newspapers. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Witwatersrand. We're inviting you, Professor, to be our first respondent, and you will be immediately followed by Dr. Sitembile Mbete, whom we'll introduce once you have spoken. Thank you very much. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Wate. Just a slight correction. I'm at UJ, Department of Politics. I have since left Jewel, unfortunately, a little while ago.
We apologize for that, which is a pity, but we also need you at UJ.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation. I must congratulate the drafters of the document. They have written them in the old commendable tradition of the ANC of self-criticism, very candid about the problems, and that is to be commended, especially when the problems seem to be getting even harder. I'm going to divide my input into 3 parts. I've timed myself for about 10 minutes about the, hopefully I'll stick to it. My comments will focus on 3 parts. First, my general reading of both documents, especially around what the documents characterize as the problem. Secondly, I'll go on to mention what I think actually is the problem, drawing, of course, from some of the details that are contained in the documents. And lastly, suggest what I think are solutions going forward. Firstly, I think there's an over-exaggeration of the problem, especially on the document Through the Eye of the Needle. Over-emphasis of money or capitalism as the problem for impropriety within the party. I don't think, and money obviously is seen as a function of being in a capitalist society. Maybe that's a problem, but I think the document pays too much emphasis on that. Because we are operating in a capitalist society anyway, and I don't think it is the aim of the ANC to eliminate capitalism. In any way, you are aiming for a mixed economy, so capitalism will always be there. So if capitalism persists to be there and you think that it is the problem, it therefore means that the problem will persist, and therefore you will not eliminate it because capitalism is there, right? So that is a mischaracterization of the problem. Because capitalism is there, you don't wish to eliminate it anyway, so it's not really an issue. It's focusing on the wrong aspect. And of course, money really, it's more of a consequential issue. It's a secondary problem, not primary. And you know, I don't think one can ever also, generally speaking, of course, eliminate the layer of money for individuals. The ANC has provided opportunities for people who would otherwise not get to make a living anywhere else. And of course, the money issue is not just money used by leaders or candidates to influence voting, but general members of the ANC participate in this money-making exercise because they get to make money. They are otherwise unemployed. I mean, as you know, conferences have become an economy on their own throughout the country where people get to make money. So they are also encouraging this money involvement in ANC activities. They go around searching for gullible individuals, promising to making them viable candidates in exchange for money. And people get monies and these monies are not accounted for. So it's a money-making scheme where everybody, mostly those who are unemployed, participate in. So it's a source of income whose lure is irresistible. So these are problems that are there. Perhaps if you think you'll eliminate them completely, you might be facing a tall order there. spending energy on something that you might not completely get rid of, because self-preservation is a human instinct. And when people are in a bind, they're always looking for ways of making livelihood. But the battle is not lost. So the problem there, which also somewhat undercuts the prominence of money within, the primary problem is the quality of membership. Because the ANC essentially starts with the membership. Members write up policies, they elect leaders. Amandla asebasebenzi, that's the source of the ANC. So if anything is to be corrected, it can only be corrected at the source, and the source is the membership. So the focus should be there. And in looking at the composition of branches or defining the membership of the ANC, I think it's critically important that we distinguish between cadres and members. There has been a fascination in the last few years with numbers, making ANC membership reach 1 million members. What value that adds exactly has not been quite apparent, and it has been celebrated. For what reason, one is not clear. What has become clear nonetheless is that quite a number of these members who are celebrated to suggest the massiveness of the ANC have in fact been the cause of the decline of the ANC, in the sense that they've become vulnerable to all sorts of solicitation for money and voting in this way or the other. So the size, the trick is not in the size. Quantity is not quality. Quantity is not pedigree. And it is in the pedigree that the caliber or the stature of the ANC lies, because this pedigree is the one that writes up document, as I said, and also elect leaders. So then you need to distinguish then between the cadres who constitute the core. The ANC has always been talking of itself as a vanguard party. Perhaps it's time that it not only talks about this, but practices it. So you have a vanguard that need not necessarily be 200 members, 700. There's no point in that. There's no value that number adds to the quality of the ANC. So you have this cadre that is sifted, that is elected on the basis of it having gone through the eye of the needle. And here you can bring all sorts of instruments that you have identified, lifestyle audits, their selection or election is determined by the election commission. So this cadre constitute your core leadership in any ward, right? And these are people, a group from whom you then elect leaders for positions, leaders who discuss documents, who add input and all that. However, you don't entirely discard supporters. Supporters are still there, but I guess one is talking of a two-tier membership, for lack of a better word, or something like that. Perhaps one can think of a much fancier word to describe that. So supporters are still part of the organization, but they are not the core from whom members are elected, or rather leaders are elected, who themselves elect leaders. Because this core is a trusted core. This is the vanguard whose integrity has been tested and examined through all sorts of measures and have indeed gone through the eye of the needle. So they are incorruptible. We entrust them with the leadership of the movement. And so the support base, it's more like inkundla yabantu, the assembly of the ANC, the old style assembly of the ANC. That is why the ANC initially had a speaker, because it regarded its meetings as an assembly of the people. So you would have a speaker that would facilitate these discussions. So you have an assembly of the ANC for the core cadre of the ANC to keep in touch with the general support base, to inform them of what the ANC is doing, to get from them their concerns and advice about how they should deal with problems that they are faced with. So you then come to the election process. When you come to the election process, because you have these cadres who are essentially participating in the election process, nominating leaders, they are immune to money influence because we have already vetted them. So instead of having candidates, presidential candidates or whatever candidate organizing their own individual gatherings, those gatherings are organized by the party, more like primaries in the United States, throughout the various structure of the ANC. This then means, as I close, this then means that you have a much more controlled process focused on leaders that have been nominated by the cadres who are trusted. Their service and commitment to the ANC is unquestioned. Then lastly, you do, of course, have to concede that there would be disputes coming up now and then at some point, but those disputes related to issues of corruption, integrity, this and that, those must be dealt with obviously by an independent body such as the Integrity Commission. I'm not sure though if you want the commission to operate alone, perhaps the disciplinary committee might be part of that bigger structure, because you cannot have, absolutely cannot have individuals who are serving in the NEC or in all sorts of structures being part of the disciplinary committee, because part of the reason why such decisions don't enjoy readily acceptance by members is because they always suspect by, yo, ubani, ufunu ubani. The decisions are taken in favor of one person over the other because members of the DC also have an interest in future contests. So what you need really generally as an overall body that preside over disputes in the ANC, it's a moral authority. It's a moral authority. You can find people in the ANC, there are quite a lot of them, whose morality is unquestioned. Their sense of fairness is unquestioned. And so these become people who have no interest in positions, who can be vouched for their own communities. So this is a big structure, combining both the DC, the commission, so they deal with issues of ethics. But the DC cannot be include serving people in current structures with leadership ambition. So that's the key issue. And final word, and this is partly the reason why the ANC, I think, since 97 or so onwards, has not been able to address its disputes, is because there has been an absence of what is seen as a neutral moral authority figures. What you have are equals, equals who refuse to defer to each other. And perhaps it has to do with the fading of a generation and a failure to order succession and election of leaders in a way that you allow for hierarchy. And you also have in between that neutral figures to whom leaders go to whenever there is a dispute. So you do need to reinforce a neutral moral authority in the ANC as a way of ensuring that all these other structures that I've suggested have a much better way of succeeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think some interesting points there, which we might want to remember. We overemphasize the issue of money. Although we live in a capitalist society, we have no interest or intention to remove capitalism. The issue of the self-preservation is a human instinct. We need to look at the quality of the membership, and where the issues really come from is from the membership base. Quantity is not a pedigree. The ANC should begin to behave like a vanguard party. We also need to look at perhaps a differentiation between a cadre member and a supporter, going back to the old ways of mobilization, assemblies of the people, or what we called in the early 90s people's forums. They did work, by the way. That perhaps presidential candidates don't run their own campaigns, that they are run by the organization. Quite a lot of depth, quite a number of issues to consider as we go into discussion. It is now an honor for me to invite Dr. Sithembile Mbete, who is a lecturer in the Department of Political Science at the University of Pretoria, where she lectures international relations and South African politics. She's an associate fellow at the Center for Governance Innovation at the University of Pretoria. She has a doctorate from the University of Pretoria on the subject of South Africa's foreign policy during the 2 elected terms at the UN Security Council. She has written and published on the economic freedom fighters in accredited journals. Her research has been funded by the National Institute for Humanities. She too has a very distinguished CV. Dr. Mbete, you are welcome, and thank you for agreeing to participate.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this event and to really follow such an illustrious list of speakers. It's a real honor and a privilege that I don't take lightly. I would like to, Prof. Ndlejana has really gone into a great deal of detail about the documents themselves and criticism around that. So I would like to take a bit of a higher overview of the context in which the discussion documents are taking place, and just raise some provocations I think that are important for the movement to consider at this particular historical juncture. The first is that in speaking, and Prof. Ndlejana alluded to that as he spoke towards the end. Fundamentally, in thinking both about organizational renewal and how the organization is operating, I think there's a prior question that we need to ask, which is, are the ANC's structures and processes still fit for purpose? Do the systems and the processes for elections, for membership selection, for leadership selection, do they still fit the mandate and the historical purpose of the ANC in 2021 in South Africa? And I think that that's an important question to ask, because many of the structures and the processes and the ways of thinking about leadership, about membership, about discipline within the party still seem to be holdovers or continuation of a very illustrious tradition and processes that were put in place to respond to particular historical moments. And there's been such a great evolution and transformation of South African society, but also internationally, that the context in which within which the ANC operates is fundamentally different to what it was in 1990. And even, you know, certainly in 2007, or even as we can see with the COVID-19 crisis, even in 2017. And so given that, is there not a prior task to be undertaken of examining the structures and the processes and saying, are they fit for purpose for the challenges that the ANC faces as a leader of society, of the South African society in 2021? And so if we're thinking in that way, then one of the benefits of that way of thinking is that it necessarily forces the movement outside of its inward-looking obsession. So there's a great deal of honest criticism in both in both documents, and this issue was raised a number of times by previous speakers about the ANC being so caught up in its internal structures and internal battles that it has lost sight of sort of the wood for the trees. And an important part of bringing the movement out of that is about saying, are the structures, are the processes still relevant for what needs to be done in South Africa now? So that's my first provocation about whether the structures and systems are fit for purpose. My second provocation is related to what Sis Phoebe was talking about what are the strands of the movement that need to be represented, and how how does the movement represent all of the sections of society that it claims to represent, and that certainly are part of its support base. And this is something that Mayor Nomvula brought up, is the youth question for me is an essential one. The moments of renewal that have been referenced before, whether it was in the 1940s with the formation of the ANC Youth League, whether it was the set of events that led to the Morogoro Conference, were all initiated and driven by young people, by youth membership of the party who held it accountable, who held leaders accountable, and who were constantly thinking about whether the operations of the party were relevant for the changes in society and for the needs of the historical moment. It seems to me that the ANC is currently missing any coordinated youth input into both the functioning of the party currently, but also in terms of the structures and the renewal conversation of the party. And I am going to be blunt enough to say that without that, without a revival of the youth capacity of the party, I think that any conversation about through the eye of the needle or organizational renewal is really like being on a treadmill or being on a stationary bicycle, because the motive forces that will move that bicycle, that will move you off the treadmill and into actually running, are young people who at the moment are completely excluded from the conversation as it is taking place. And so that's my second thing about, if you think about the strands of the movement, where are the youth who have always been the engine of renewal within the ANC? A third point that I want to raise is, I suppose in some ways linked to my first, and it's a response to Ubabumthethwa, who was speaking about looking at the electoral processes and the influence of money in the electoral processes of the ANC. And I tend here to agree with Prof. Ntletsana that the money itself isn't the problem, it's a manifestation of other ills within the party and around membership and the kind of organizational culture that has come to dominate. But saying then that there'll be an effort to look at the examples of the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party of Cuba to see how they manage their leadership processes. Seems to me a bit of a backwards way of looking at things, where the first step should be understanding the different forces in society that are making money and that are making greed such important factors in the electoral processes of the party. So part of what I think that the ANC, certainly from leadership level down, and I think there was a comment on there was somebody in the comments who spoke about, not being able to get information down to branches. But I actually don't think that there's sufficient information that is going from branches to leadership to actually understand what the motivations are, what the processes are that are working within society as a whole that are leading to these kinds of tendencies within the ANC. And without understanding that, without getting in touch with that, it'll be immensely difficult to take the lessons that you need to from other parties, from other places that have very different socioeconomic circumstances and conditions than the ones that we are facing now. So the leadership of the party, but the people who are going to be participating in these NGC discussions need to have a in-depth knowledge of the society they are in before looking outside to find models from elsewhere. And this is an important part of establishing that credibility and trust with the people that has been spoken about extensively. And then a final point is this idea of consequence management, which Sis Phoebe brought up, and Prof. Ndlejana as well, about the idea that we can have all of the policies, the frameworks around accountability that we want. But if those are never enacted, if they don't actually make a difference in terms of whether people can continue to be in leadership, can be re-elected, can continue to hold positions, then it actually is meaningless. And so the idea of consequence management, are the policies, are the resolutions of the party actually implemented when they need to be, is a very important one that needs to be thought out. And I think there needs to be serious reflection. I think there's a great deal of self-criticism that's reflected in the documents and an acknowledgement of what has gone wrong. But the prior step of, or going beyond that, and the self-reflection that says, well, why has this gone wrong, is what is missing. And I think it's that holds the key to answering the puzzle of how to have effective consequence management to take the ANC forward. And the reality is that the ANC is the party in South Africa that has the broadest base of support, that has the infrastructure and the institutions to lead society. But the ANC needs to make sure that it continues to, that it is fit for that purpose, because at the moment, as the documents say, all indications show that it is not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbete. That was definitely a lot of powerful points to give us some things to think about. Are we fit for purpose? Are our structures fit for purpose? Is the context in which we operate now not telling us that we need to have a different system within which we work? We must examine the structures that we're in now. That will help us to overcome our internal battles. We also, the most important thing you have raised today is the issue of the youth and the vital importance of having a vibrant, independent thinking and very challenging youth to assist the ANC grow and to be able to deal with the challenges of today. Money is not the problem, it is really a manifestation of other ills that are there. There's not, you make a very important point that you say there's not enough information from branches to the leaders to provide a context of what leads to particular behavior. And we need to understand the society we are living in order for us to be able to lead it properly. I think that's very important. And you also go back to consequence management. Comrades and friends, I'm now going to open for discussion. And here are the rules. And I'm afraid, I'm sorry, but there must always be rules. We have in this session, we have 45 minutes. We have 210 participants. I may only be able to take a few hands for 1 minute each. I'll do my best. The way in which to raise your hand is on the right-hand side of your machine, or at the bottom where it says reactions. There's a button that you press to show that you indicate that you want to speak, and then I will call out your name, but you will only have 1 minute, please. Comrade Lemarco, you are the first, followed by Comrade Michael Nkosi and Lucky Ngomani. I'll take those three hands first. So Comrade Lemarco, please go ahead.
No, thank you, Comrade DSG, and greetings to all, Comrade. Comrade, on through of the needling, I think Comrade Nati just made very important issues, but my worry is that we are just talking about these issues, but the implementation, it is not seen on the ground. And we need to pick up the socks on that matters, because most of the time we are talking good points, but we don't do nothing. This is the right time, as we are facing the BBGMs, AGMs, to start to teach our members what kind of leaders that we need. Because the problem, as Prof. Nkejana is starting to, that he raised, is the issue of the members that we are recruiting, because are the ones whom they are recruited just for the conference purposes, coming with numbers of delegates. So it is very important that also we deal with issue of self-criticism, that the leadership, we the leadership are the one who are causing problem, because people on the ground, the members need to be supervised, but it's us with dysfunctional issues that we are not honest and we are not doing ethical things to the ANC. If we can stop that, as Comrade Nomvola said, that we must be honest and do things according, I think we can move. But the last issue of the renewal, it must start with us. The issue of political education. If we don't start to educate our members who are part of the local councils, members of legislatures and national parliament, those people who are there, they're just serving for the purpose of any man. They don't understand the policies, why they must do things right. And if we miss that, ANC is dying. That's my little input that I want to make in front of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Lemarco. Comrade Michael Nkosi. Comrade Michael.
Thank you, DSG. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Am I audible, DSG?
Yes, you are.
All right. Okay, thank you, DSG. I think the first problem that, in fact, not a problem, but a challenge. DSG, I think one, let's talk about this fourth IR, because now we're losing a lot, the leader saying, simply because these network issues, and of which it's depriving of very important information. That's just the point that I want to pass through. Secondly, through the eye of the needle, it's still a relevant document even today. The only thing we need to do, we need to begin to change certain laws here and there. But most importantly, you can change the entire document even if you want to, it's okay. but you won't deal with individuals' perceptions and look into things. Because the only problem that we have, I'm telling you, is the leadership at the top. All policies, all documents of the ANC are designed, to give branches the say, to give branches as the basic unit, the task of taking decisions in the ANC and give the leadership to implement. But when you have people who have money in the organization, who are taking advantage of the branches that they know that are unemployed, people who know that they've not done work enough in the organization to be identified by branches as leaders, so as to they are elected to position of responsibility. They are taking advantage of that and they are buying these branches. And that's the thing that we must start talking to. You are talking to an individual attitude to these matters. You can design all these policies, but you can never change the mind of a person. All what we need to do is this. We need to educate our branches. What happened to the 10-year of a case that was resolved upon in the 53rd National Conference? What did we do to educate our branches? Because the strength of the ANC lies on the branches. Did we educate our branches enough? Why can't we go back to basics and deal with that? I can see today we have all the professors and all that, but what we are seeing...
Comrade, your time is up. Thank you very much. I think you've made very credible points.
Comrade, DSG. Okay, it's fine.
1 minute each. We have a lot of people who would like to speak. Thank you very much. Comrade Lucky Ngomani.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, TSG, and thank you, everyone. My quick one is actually, I've got 2 points that I want to raise or to comment on. The first one will be the one that Professor Lechana has just raised, the one of the compilation or the formation of the disciplinary committee, where he said you find that the people who are supposedly going to be members of this committee are actually required to be honest people who have no interest whatsoever. But the situation we're sitting with now as it stands is that you'll find people who are so interested. Of course, it's true. But my contribution to this, Comrade TSG, is that how if we can get people from the Integrity Commission, of course, to join there, but also the people who are actually most vulnerable are the ones that making some few, reservations when certain decisions must be made. Then if those people can be employed, the members of the Integrity Commission or those who are going to be part of the DC, be employees of the ANC at the HQ, those who are going to be working for the ANC. That is one point. The other point was the one that Comrade Mbete, Professor Mbete was talking about. The one where she said the recreation or the changes that the ANC has seen over the period were influenced by the youth of the ANC. The people that she said on its words that we have neglected as members. And I just want to say is the problem that makes them to be neglected because we have killed them through monies. Now, it's the processes that we must actually inspect or observe, the processes of electing our members or our leaders. That must not include money. Well, the relevancy to see or to say whether it's still relevant at this time, well, we need to do a very much introspection, but I think the important part here is the way that we can help to delete that usage of money as and when these processes are actually started. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Comrade. Comrade Jonas Boshumani.
Thank you, SG, Deputy SG, and greetings to the leadership. Well, I think we must welcome the very robust inputs from all participants. I have three issues here that I think in the organization we've been more diagnostic on issues that affect us. We know that money politics, factionalism has always been a top-down syndrome in the ANC, where leaders will go down, influence branches, divide branches, and so on and so forth. So through patronage, of course, and access to resources in the state, in the main. So we know where the problem lies. I think the challenge has always been lack of action. We know that we come from a conference, 54th conference, in which there are very strong allegations of the conference having been accorded through money. So it's up to us whether we want to chase lizards or deal with crocodiles and show a resonance in terms of determination to root out money politics in the organization. That's my first input. My second one is the system of checks and balances. If tomorrow, for example, we now become aware that, for instance, Comrade Nomvula is going around, is splashing money, is influencing branches, then what? What is the system that is going to detect, that is going to charge, that is going to politically arrest that behavior, and ultimately ensure that everybody who's of the same mindset and behavior is aware that should you be found doing this, you will be charged and disqualified in the organization. So I don't think we can talk of the Integrity Commission here. You need a system that will detect. And the last issue is the issue of separating the state and the organization, because at some point, I think we have taken some of the principled position that says if you are a chair of the province, you are likely to be the premier, which is not the case in all cases. But if you are the president of the organization, you are also likely to be the president of the country. Is that on its own, not having one person accounting to themselves? Is it not time that we must come with a regime that says, if you are in the state, stay there and work in the state and account to the organization? And there are those that you'll find at the head office or at the region or at province who you'll account to in terms of what you'll be doing there. And in so doing, be able to ensure accountability and probably stem some of the ill-disciplined behavior that we are seeing, which is materially based. Thanks.
Prof, you are the next speaker.
Please. Is that me, Comrade DS?
Yes, Prof, you'll have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first, let me appreciate all those who gave inputs. And I will suggest, Comrade GSG, that the very important questions that were raised by our respondents, that the journal membered, be part of our discussion papers under the renewal. Further than that, I would ask this question to, I'm sure, Gemet Stembile. The vibrancy of our youth, can it be real or a fact that we have lost this to EFF? Because EFF are all, if not, almost all, if not all, are from the ANC Youth League. Can that be a fact? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Comrade Johnny de Lange.
Chair, thank you for a really excellent dialogue. I think so many interesting points have been raised. I would really suggest that a summary of this dialogue be circulated to branches, because I think it would stimulate a lot of interest and debate. Of course, time only allows me to raise one issue, and that is particularly the issue raised by Ms. Mbete. And this is the issue of the structure of the ANC and how we organize. And she raises the very pertinent point. I mean, the context in which we formed the ANC at the unbanning, is that context still the same today? Is the form of organization that we have in the ANC actually achieving what we want to achieve? Is the form of organization, doesn't it actually lead to the capture of the ANC as has taken place from time to time? And I really think that this for me is a vital question, because you have to go and look back at the history of when we formed this ANC structure after the unbanning. At that time, of course, all our structure, of course, the ANC itself was mainly an underground and clandestine organization, and that's how it operated at the time we formed the ANC. So you bring those experiences to the ANC. Inside the country, we had the trade union movement, and they basically organized in the workplace. We had the UDF and the MDN. If you go and look at those structures, all of them, except your civic structures, organized sectorally. It's only the sectoral, the civic structures that organize geographically. The ANC is exclusively geographically based. Its branches are where we live. Its branches are formed in each ward. Now, I'm not saying that that's not important. Of course, it's important that we form branches where we live. But is that really the only form of organization that we should have within the ANC? Shouldn't we be considering creating sectors, allowing to them to be part of the ANC, and thereby broadening and deepening the base of the ANC membership? If you go and look in many areas of our country, although the ANC is everywhere, but in many middle-class areas and many areas of particularly non-African groupings, you don't have branches anymore. They don't exist. So all those people that live in those areas where we tell them to become members, where do they become members? There are no branches there. If we had a sectoral organizational basis and we created sectors as we did under the UDF and UDM to be part of our structure and the members from there, then of course we're creating a really different and a more dynamic organization, one that can draw people in other than just geographically. This is a really long discussion we have, but I think the question Ms. Mbete has raised really needs to be answered by the ANC. Is the present structure the optimal structure that we can have in this country to make us a viable structure that operates and thinks like a liberation movement, but actually operates like a political party? And I would really think there are a lot of other aspects of the ANC's operation that also can be looked in this regard. For example, the whole concept of the ANC branch being the basic unit of the organization. Is that in reality what happens in the ANC? I don't think so. She's raised the issue of how does information come from branches to national? At the moment, anything you want to do in a branch, you have to filter through regional structures, provincial structures. As a branch, you have no input at all, and information from branches other than through this filtered mechanisms cannot get to the national leadership. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to look at, the structure of the ANC, how it operates. If you go and look at our documents, not in a single document do we raise this issue of whether the structure of the ANC is the optimal structure that we should have, particularly in today's world. So as I said, there are a lot to be said, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Comrade Themba Freeman.
No, thank you, TSG. And also would like to thank all the presenters for the thought-provoking presentation. TSG is 2 points that I'm going to raise. One is on the nexus between our constitution and the urgent task to lead the renewed organization. Because obviously discipline will be crucial to realize and achieve this task of renewing the organization. What is then the role of the constitution to deal with members who do not have, say, the appetite to commit to this program of organizational renewal? If all of us as members of the ANC must belong to a properly constituted ANC. And the other point is just a technical one. The logic in placing the subject of organizational renewal on page 138 of the discussion document as published in Umrabulo. It is now quite clear at DSG from the discussions today that all other strategic tasks must be discharged by an organization that is renewed and fit for purpose. Maybe this could have just been for printing purposes, but equally one is convinced that it should have taken the first spot to allow all other discussions to follow from it. Because DSG would remember that the Nasra conferences indicated that a lot of time was spent discussing organizational renewal, and relegating it to page 138, does not say to us this occupied the most urgent task for the organization from reading Umrabulo alone. So as I said, this is just a technical issue, and maybe those who published Umrabulo can maybe attend to this one. Thank you, DSG.
Thank you very much. Comrade Els Temba.
Oh, thanks, DSG. Let's also appreciate all the inputs. We will just rise on 2-3 issues. One, DSG, is that I think it's time that we must also just pause a bit and take stock, of all the resolutions that the movement will have taken, and how far we have gone in terms of actual implementation. Because reinventing the wheel does not necessarily take us anywhere. And I think that's a point where we should be. Secondly, DSG, I'm not sure how far is the movement subscribing to the principles of democratic centralism, because our members on the ground continue or are able to necessarily align themselves with what the top leadership of the movement is saying. Now, when we continue to have mixed messages in terms of decisions of the structure by those who are supposed to be able to actually being able to communicate decisions of the organization, that necessarily continues to cause a lot of confusion on the ground. The last point that I want to make, DSG, is that as we continue to reorganize the organization, there are instances where we put in interim structures like the task teams. Maybe one of the things that we could consider is that those who've got interest in being elected, whilst we know that they are members in good standing, however, they must not be afforded that responsibility to lead the renewal process, because in most instances, they have demonstrated their uncontrollable appetite to lead at all costs. And therefore, it is the cause of these continuous factions and the manner in which the movement is not getting off the ground, because they have got their own interest instead of taking the responsibility of rebuilding the organization. Thanks very much, DSG.
Thank you very much. Comrade, no, I can't see. Comrade Senzeni. Comrade Senzeni Mpila.
Thanks, DSG. Thanks very much for the input. Let me also join the wagon of appreciating the discussions. They are very rich. But I think there are two issues, and the other one maybe is more of emphasis for me. It's an issue of a DC. How do we compose the DC? The way that we are composing the DC now does not assist the ANC. The other issue is the quality and the type of membership. Comrade Dream do have spoken about it at length. I thought that today is going to speak about it again, but just make it in passing. What type of members do you want? We want to take the posture that Prof. Mdlejan is raising to say that let's separate the two. Who are the cadres that they can able to lead the organization? Are we going to have the supporters that we are going to have 2 or 5 million members? But if we know that you want to jump this way to able to lead or to able to be deployed to a strategic position, these are certain particular hurdles that you must able to pass so that we can able to test your integrity and your credibility for you to able to lead. The last issue, in the last policy conference, Comrade DSG, Eastern Cape came up with a proposal, and I thought that this proposal will be part of this discussion document. 1 member, 1 vote. If we go to national conference, we focus on 1 member, 1 vote. This particular issue will be able to deal with many other issues, because of even the issue of the money of buying people. It's not necessarily buying the entire branch. but is buying those few 5,000 delegates out of the 1 million or 800,000 members of the ANC that are going to decide the fate of the ANC and its own leadership. So if the ANC knows very well that it goes to a national conference, 6 months before it prepare provinces with the assistance, and they get the independent, credible, IEC that is running elections in each and every region, so that all those particular members' interests that who's supposed to lead the ANC with the integrity, they can able to do that. So I think those two issues, I want maybe DSG, maybe obviously from our own branches, will able to make those particular input. But I think those are very important issues to deal with, issues of if we want to manage the issue of money, because you can't buy more than 2,000 branches. Individual members. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Comrade MacDonald.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I want to comment on the issue of consequence management. That's one of the serious challenges that as an organization we are facing, and that it is because of institutionalized faction that we are unable to deal with consequence management, and it is now spreading also even in the public sector where there's no consequence management on the public servants. But the problem is the issue of factionalism. If an individual comrade is found wanting, it depends on which faction he or she belongs to. So discipline will only depend on whether you are in an influential faction. That's when you might be subjected to discipline. So as long as we're still not dealing with the issue of factionalism, we'll have a challenge also in terms of consequence management. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrade Lekgetho Teki. Comrade Teki. Okay, it's not with us any longer. We'll go to Comrade Libro Mavundu. Comrade Libro.
Thanks, DSG.
Thank you.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
No, thanks very much. I just want to also be very brief and want to align my contribution to what Senzeni Mpila was reflecting on here. That perhaps as and when we are doing this introspection, let's also deal with issues of our position in terms of numbers. We seem to be very much interested on quantity than quality. So I'm saying if we can approach our conferences and other things by having equal representation on branches, we will be able to start doing justice to our organization. As we stand now, you'll have, because of money's influence, of course, you'll have branches bringing in 35 people, delegates. And that on itself does not necessarily mean that they are bringing quality inputs in the conference. That's why you'll always have a problem of people who will be howling in the conference until the conference comes to an end. Let's discuss these things. We are not in a competition for numbers. We are leading. Let's have representation like how the ANC used to be. You'll have chiefs coming from a certain area representing its people. Let's have leaders elected by branches on equal basis. In conclusion, I was expecting Mseni will also talk to these things. He once presented a very nice kind of a session in the memorial of Rigwala, where he emphasized this matter that let's begin to go back to our basics. This thing of numbers is also killing us. Thanks,
Thank you, comrade. Thank you so much. Comrade, I'm sorry to cut you, but we're running out of time, seriously. Comrade Andile Mosha.
Thanks very much, DSG. I just want to pose one question. Within the spirit of realizing organizational renewal, as well as revival of through the eye of the needle, what can be done to mitigate the dominance of political dichotomy? I just want to ask that question from all the panelists, if they can assist.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Comrade Tapelo. Comrade.
Thank you, DSG and panelists. What comes with regards to the Veterans League, I think that more efforts should be focused towards creating a Veterans League, so that with an active Veterans League, it allows for segregation of the different generations within the organization. And that would allow for the youth to come in and to have room, because the veterans would be playing a different role instead of all being in one kind of system. Thank you, Daisy.
Thank you. Prof, I'm going to give you the floor for response first, because I know that you have to leave in 5 minutes. I hope 5 minutes is enough for you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I think I mean, kind of agreement with most of the points that have been made. I think there is some realization, and I think these are points were also made a lot earlier by colleagues. The truthfulness about the kind of problem that we have and how these are impacting. The issue of quantity has also just been raised now, issues of DC. But the last thing that I would want to add really is to re-emphasize the fact that I think there are a lot of people of good moral character, not just in the ANC, but in our society generally. I mean, anecdotally, for instance, in the townships, whenever there are disputes, there would always be one person that people would agree that that person is fair. Let's go to him or her to preside over this. And that person should not necessarily be educated or this or that, but people who have distinguished themselves by the strength of their own character in their own communities. And I think for me, the ANC should strive towards that. And of course, you know, there are issues of, could be accused of elitism and vanguardism, but the point is you have a problem. And this speaks to what Ste was saying earlier, a little bit of reconfiguration to meet the challenges of the time. And for me, that is the agility that is required. The whole idea that the ANC is like an elephant, it takes a while to turn. You know, you might want to be a cheetah now and turn quickly because things are tough. But with those words, Ms. Duarte, thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to go and attend to some parental chores.
Thank you very much for participating and for your very valuable and informative input. We've all learned a great deal. And also you've given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much. Dr. Mbete, can I invite you to make a few closing remarks, responding? You are muted. Stay, you are
there
muted.
we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was having a bit of trouble unmuting myself. Thank you so much for all of the feedback and all of the engagement from the questions and the comments. I want to say, in response to the question about whether the Youth League all went with the EFF, I think that I think certainly a considerable amount of the leadership of the Youth League went into the EFF, but I think that what got lost more than anything else isn't the leadership of particular individuals, it's the momentum of youth organizing within the ANC that was lost. So many of the other leaders at different provincial structures different regional structures of the Youth League have actually just fallen out of politics altogether, and either focused on being in business or focused on other areas. And so it's a lot less about the loss of the individuals than it is about the loss of an organizing momentum. And I think that can be recreated with the young people that are within the ANC now. They just need to be given the opportunity to do so. Or the obstacles that are in place that are preventing them from being able to do so need to be removed. And I think that is really the key. I think that one thing that the EFF has been able to tap into is to tap into the imagination and the hunger of young people, just broadly, to be engaged in politics and to be engaged in the life of the country in a constructive manner. And that energy, there are millions, the bulk of the population is under the age of 35. And so there are plenty of young people that can be engaged, but I think that this space needs to be created for that to take place. And then, yes, thank you to everybody on the comments on the idea of the organizational design and organizational renewal. I do think that, revitalizing the Eastern Cape discussion on one member, one vote is perhaps a good place to start. To say, well, is it still necessary to have the kind of conference structures that the ANC has? But yeah, that is amongst a few other issues I think that could be discussed in terms of the organizational design and making it fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comrade Nomvula? Comrade Nomvula?
Thank you, Comrade DSG. I was battling to unmute myself. Thanks to the two participants that were responding. I think this has enriched our own work as the African National Congress. And I think it's only the ANC that opens up participation on its own issues and works on doing an introspection of the ANC as an organization, worse even by those that are in the leadership of the party itself. That is one of the things that we need to appreciate, because the renewal is not for the self, it's the renewal for the people of South Africa. And I also want to indicate that in all the work that is being done between now and the National General Council, there are immediate tasks. And amongst those tasks are the issues around participating in the discussion documents. It is also about ensuring that there is organizational renewal and design. The things that Comrade Tony Dilange spoke about the past experience of the UDF and the Mass Democratic Movement on how they were structured, also fall within the work that we are now busy with, which I think the President, together with the entire top six, have been in the forefront of dealing with regard to sectoral work. Noting, of course, that the decision on how then we look at the structures going forward has to be something that we do not suppress, but we must continue dealing with those kind of issues. For example, the ANC has been quite concerned about the character of our own Federation of Trade Unions against our commitment towards working with all organized formations in the country, including those that are not affiliated to COSATU, as well as ensuring that we have a lot of mass work that has demonstrated some intention and commitment towards the realization of the resolutions of the African National Congress. The good work that has been done through the ANC Women's League, I think we take cognizance of that work through the Young Women's Desk, as well as mobilizing the LGBTQI community it's those attempts, and from our side, the work that is being done by the Progressive Business Forum as part of the work that we are dealing with in the movement. Just in this last NEC, the commitment has been beyond just the revival of the Youth League, but also the intention by the ANC to go out through our sectoral work in interacting with young people, engaging them on the documents, as well as just appreciating what the young people of South Africa are yearning for and what they believe should be done by the African National Congress. The other thing that I wanted to respond to, Comrade,
your time is almost up. You've got like 30 seconds.
Is for all of us who are members of the ANC, let's find these platforms as opportunities to renew ourselves, to empower each other, and to make sure that we become a better organization post the National General Council and the convening of the BGMs that the ANC is now going to be embarking on from the first week of March. But thank you very much for the participation of many of our comrades, and I'm also humbled to have been part of this panel. Thanks, Comrade DSG.
Thank you, Comrade Nomvula. Comrade Ndu?
Thanks, DSG, and thanks to all comrades who participated. Just briefly, Comrade DSG, I think, personally, I want to agree with the sentiment that says we've got to think about whether the current organizational arrangement is sufficient for what we seek to achieve. I think we need to have that discussion. The second point that I think is perfectly correct is the point that says, to a larger extent, the source of the problem in the organization is found within the leadership echelon, from the level of the branch to the level of the National Executive Committee. When you look at the problems that are confronting the ANC, in the main, it's not necessarily the rank and files. It's comrades that are supposed to be the one who are providing leadership and guidance to society. The third point is that I think we do need to think very very hard about the role of the Veterans League. This thing of having a Veterans League that enjoy the same status as the other leagues of the ANC, I think is self-defeating. We have to review it. It has to be the league that is not inserting itself into internal contestation for leadership position in the ANC, so that whenever the league is speaking, the Veterans League, they enjoy that kind of legitimacy and the credibility. The last 2 points that I want to make. I think going to the NGC and beyond the NGC, Comrade TSG, we need to embark on a massive engagement of our structures so that we can develop a common understanding about the nature of the crisis facing the organization, and also the kind of the ANC that is required or that will be created by the renewal of the ANC. That may ultimately, in my own view, because when we need to set new standards, when we talk about the quality of membership and the quality of leadership, what we may have to consider doing as part of the radical approach to the renewal of the ANC, is that we may have to set standards which will necessitate that all of us who are already members of the ANC must then rejoin the ANC and be measured on the basis of the new standards that would have set and agreed upon to determine whether we qualify to come back and be members of the ANC. Because otherwise, if we don't do that, we're going to continue attracting members who are not at the level at which is required, but equally, we may keep within our ranks quite a number of membership that determines leadership and gets elected, which is not fit for purpose. Thanks for commenting.
Thank you very much. Comrade Phoebe?
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair. I think that, thank you. The issues were really, the discussion was very vibrant, and thank you for Comrade's participation. First issue, I agree with Prof that the problem, the identification of the problem solely as capitalism doesn't necessarily address what we're dealing with. My sense is that the problem is more the legacy of colonialism of a special type and patriarchy, and how it manifests today, and the fact that over the last 27 years, we have not fundamentally dealing with we've removed the laws, we've put in place the basic framework for dealing with those issues, But as we said in the 2012 second transition document, you know, a lot of those key elements of colonialism of a special type and patriarchy reflect itself, as we saw during the COVID pandemic. You know, people that are affected are people in the townships, it's informal settlements, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the one point. Now, how it then translate into the difficulties that the ANC face, it therefore means that social mobility in our society comes through a very limited ways. One, if you are able to go to school, you graduate, you get a good job. So that's a form of social advancement. And increasingly, with graduate unemployment, even that space is beginning to narrow. Second one is through involvement in politics, because you can become a councillor, you can become a member of parliament, you can have access to those. So I think that for me, the link between those objective factor of the type of society that we have 26 years later and the impact on the ANC and the constituency that participate in the ANC is an important thing. And I think that the same can go for Black business. The way that Afrikaner capital built was through access through state procurement. And therefore we need to look at these issues, but that's very briefly. Second point is that I agree with comrades that we need to look at the question about our organizational processes, our organizational structure, as Comrade Confi in the chat group say that it should be organizational renewal as well as redesign. We need to look at that, and I think that there's a little bit of I suppose amongst the drafters, there was a little bit of fatigue. What is it? Resolution fatigue. Because we had a process, when was it, 2006, 2007, that was led by Comrade Tabang, with very wide-ranging proposals. Some of them come up time and again, but I think that we maybe need to keep re-looking at it and ask the question about whether we fit for purpose. Final point is the point raised between the difference between a cadre party and a mass party. Now, for me, who's grown up, and I'm sure Comrade Nomvula, Comrade Nati, Comrade DSG, Comrade Ndu, who cut our teeth in the mass movement of the 1980s. That's never been a either or. That we and even in terms of our approach to organization, we always said that at the core of your mass movement is your cadres. I think that the different question, rather than saying that we need either a mass party or we need a cadre-based party, is to be able to say what makes it difficult today to retain, to develop and to grow your cadreship so that they can play that role within the broad mass movement that we are building, which the ANC is part of, but also in terms of sectors. And I think that should be part of the questions that we must raise about whether we fit for purpose, and therefore the question about what kind of branches do we need, what kind of sectoral structures, etc. But I think excellent questions. Thank you very much, comrades.
Thank you, Comrade Phoebe. Comrade Nati.
Thank you, Comrade DSG, and thanks to comrades. I agree with the comrade who says that this engagement should find a way, the compilation, and comrades are here, Comrade JP from Umrabulo are here, and from the school, because they are valuable for us taking the process forward. I want to touch just on two issues that what Professor Mcebisi has said, that it's not necessarily the case. I think if you look at the broader issues of colonialism, the sway of capitalism today, globally, its values, which are displayed publicly, globally, all the time, the colonialism of a special type, as Comrade Phoebe Assay has raised, these are description of the objective reality, which we can't say that cadres of the movement as part of this society are unaffected about that, I mean, with that. And that assertion should be looked into from the point of view of the entire point we're making. We're saying there are these values, but we juxtapose that with the values and principles of the ANC and say that cadres of the movement should be able, understanding what is objectively out there, should be able to be above that. And the second point, Comrade Chair, what Dr. Mbete raised, that the leadership, before getting lessons elsewhere, should be au fait with what is happening on the ground. Actually, the leadership of the movement is so interwoven with the structures, and it knows what is happening on the ground, including being part of the problem, actually. So that, I think, we should make it very clear that that kind of interaction is there. The last point, Chair, Comrade DSG, the quality of membership which has been raised, and I think it's an important point, and we must accept that point in the document through the eye of a needle, precisely because of the observation at the time that we are seeing the quantity over quality, and we must do something about that and look at the best cadres within the movement to lead the movement and the transformation process. Came out of that very understanding of the kind of quality and the intensification of cadre development program. Thank you very much, Comrade DSG.
Thank you very much, Comrade Nati. Comrades, I will only make one comment. I think that in everything everyone has said, some vital issues that do come out is the question of implementation. It's all very well to make a number of very good recommendations and implement nothing. So the ANC has to begin to focus itself on its ability to implement its own decisions. Honesty of the leaders is a vitally important matter. I think that this is an issue that does affect how leaders and people who are in the branches, who are also leaders, by the way, interact with each other. Revolutionary honesty, the ability to tell each other very frankly what the issues are and how we need to move forward, and not, the old adage of buying face of a leader because you're afraid that you might be punished if you say something that the leader doesn't like. But it's not about that. It's about having the courage to put forward whatever you wish to put forward for the organization and to put the country and the organization first. The fourth industrial revolution, the inability of some people to participate evenly and equally because they don't have the facilities, they don't have data, they don't have instruments. I think that's a very, very difficult one, because in the new normal, that is really what is beginning to happen. And therefore we must go forward. Somebody said perceptions must be dealt with. We can't only deal with what we think is wrong, but there are perceptions out there, and the leadership and the branches and everybody needs to deal with that. The question of being diagnostic about ourselves is important, yes, but money and factions are really the problem of from the top down to the ANC at the bottom. I picked up those as other issues that we must include in our discussions, in our document that came from this discussion, which I want to thank everybody for. I'd like to apologize for having cut people, sometimes at an inappropriate moment when they were in full flight, but I have no choice because we're running out of time. And I do want to say thank you very, very much to all of you who have given so much of yourselves to this discussion, and to our presenters and the Prof and Dr. Mbete. Thank you very much for having participated. But comrades, we hope you'll come back again and again so that we enrich the possibility for the ANC to go to an NGC with a very, very, a volume of very rich documents for us to discuss. Thank you very much, comrades. I think